one of two things is going to happen. Either we're going to decide that I can solve your problem, we'll go down the path of doing that, or we're not. And either one is fine with me. And I just want to be respectful that that's what I'd like to talk about today. Does that sound like a good agenda? Good morning, Sales Ascender. What's happening today? It's Thursday. So let's just jump right into it. Jamie asks this today. She says, Sean, how do I transition a connection call to be a sales call? I remember when I first started doing this, it was so awkward when I actually learned to set an appointment, and I would get into the sales conversation and I walk into this appointment and I would be like, oh man, hey, we're just shooting the breeze a little bit. And then I always had just such a hard time wrenching the conversation around to actually talk about the things that I wanted to talk about. It wasn't until I hired a sales coach by the name of Steve, and he said, hey man, there's this thing, you gotta learn you gotta set the agenda of the call. I was like, what does that even mean? And so we kind of walked through learning this one little technique. I was like, oh, you just have to basically get into the conversation and start chatting with somebody. And then when it's time, when you feel like, okay, you've kind of bonded and connected enough, now we need to turn this into something that we can actually get onto some railroad tracks and go in a direction that we all like. Hey, let's create an analogy, because sales is a sport. And if you don't believe me, please prove me wrong. Like, why is sales not a sport, right? It has all the same rules, or it should have all the same rules. And if sales is a sport, then we know that we can set the rules of the game up, because I call it sales as a game, right? And so what I say is set the rules of the game. So what game stands for is an analogy. G stands for grateful, A stands for ask, M stands for me, and E stands for end. And so when you say this analogy, you're in this conversation. Imagine you're in this conversation and you're talking to somebody and it's kind of like, oh, it's weird. You don't quite know how to turn it into that salesy kind of conversation. Maybe it's a connection call. Maybe it's the first time that you're speaking with somebody. And you say something like this. You say, hey, John, I'm so grateful to be here today. Thanks for, sharing what you just shared with me. Look, I'd like to ask you a few questions about blank. And whatever it is you want to ask some questions about, you just drop your agenda in there. And then you say, I'm sure you're probably going to have some questions for me, whether it be about myself, my company, and whatever else. And then at the end, one of two things is going to happen. Like, I would like to really see if I can help solve a problem for you. If I can, great. But if I can't, great, right? No pressure here. I just want to make sure that we can actually accomplish the things that I think I'd like to accomplish today, and you probably would as well. Does that make sense? And then you wait for the answer, and they're going to say yes. And then you literally say, is there anything you'd like to add to the agenda? And then they'll always, if they want to, they'll add something. And if they don't, they won't. And you say, great. Well, if you don't mind, I'm just going to start firing some questions at you. And then boom, you've now transitioned your weird kind of awkward conversation right into that place where now you can actually start to sell stuff to the people, right? And then you can start to dig in and learn if they truly have the pain of the problem that you solve. And if they do, go deep, right? Go as deep as you can. If you're in that conversation and it's weird for you, remember that analogy, setting the rules of the game. You got to have kind of a time limit. Every game has a time limit. So say, hey, the call today, I've got about 45 minutes. Does that sound good for you? Yes. Okay, great. I'm super grateful to be speaking with you. I'm going to ask you a few questions about, here's my agenda, items 1, 2, and 3. I'm sure you're going to have questions for me. Whether it be about me or my company or whatever, I'd be happy to answer all of those. And then at the end, one of two things is going to happen. Either we're going to decide that I can solve your problem, we'll go down the path of doing that, or we're not. And either one is fine with me. And I just want to be respectful that that's what I'd like to talk about today. Does that sound like a good agenda? Yes. Great. Is there anything you would like to add to the agenda? No, this sounds great. Perfect. Mind if I start firing some questions at you? And literally, boom, that's it. Like, you can use that same script over and over and over. Here's what I recommend. Watch that little piece of this video over 5 times. Go practice it in the mirror a couple of times, and then start using it in your sales calls. I tell you what, when I started doing this in my world, my close percentages went from 0, where they were, into a 36% boost in closed deals. And so that's what I wanted to share with you today. And I hope, Jamie, this answers your question. I know it helped me a ton. I know it will help you a ton. Happy selling. Talk to you later.